welcome to the RD Studio YouTube channel. My name is Rachel, and today I will be walking you through a mini branding challenge activity on the free Adobe Illustrator program alternative called Linearity Curve. We're going to be diving right in and learning all about layers, the pen tool, typography, and more. Think about this video as a crash course into Linearity Curve. So I'm going to be going a bit fast, so just want to give you a heads up. Please feel free to slow down this video. I'm going to be going through a lot of different features in the program in a relatively quick amount of time. Okay, first things first, if you don't already have Linearity Curve downloaded onto your computer, tablet, or desktop, go ahead and pause this video right now to go to the App Store and install it real quick. If you have Linearity Curve ready to go ahead and open the program so we can get started. Okay, so Linearity Curve looks just like this. It's this little orange app with a cool vectorized pencil at the bottom of my screen right where my mouse is hovering. So we're going to go ahead and click on that to open it, and I'm going to make this larger. You are going to get a screen that looks like this. Upon opening up the program, we get, again, this cute little home page where we can import files, create a new document, or access previous files we worked on. So for this branding challenge, I would like you to click on New Document, and I want you to scroll down until you see the size option US letter right here. Since we're only designing a logo for this tutorial, we don't really need a particular size document. So when size doesn't matter, I tend to stick with a basic 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper simply because if I decide to print out the file later on, I don't need to have access to a fancy printer with special paper sizes. So for example, if I wanted to show a client different iterations of a logo, I could just print those iterations nice and easy from my home printer. However, if you do need to customize the size of your document for another project in Linearity Curve that you're doing, you can pick a different preset size like the ones listed here. So we have A2 and A4, or you could go to this little width and height info box right here and type in the dimensions you need. You can change the measurement you're using. So obviously, because I live in the US, inches is probably the biggest measurement and the measurement I would use most often. But if I'm working with maybe within a different Adobe program or Adobe alternative program, I might end up using picas or points. I might use pixels if I'm dealing with a lot of photos or bringing photos in and out of Photoshop or Photopea and bringing them into Linearity Curve. So those dimensions are there depending on the different assets or design materials you're bringing into your project. Okay, so with that being said, for this project in particular, we're just going to stick with US letter. We're going to go ahead and click the Create button right here. And Linearity Curve is going to pull that document right up for you. We're going to make this a little bit bigger. Awesome. So this is what we have. Right now we have a blank document that we can begin working with. So think about this document as a blank canvas, and we're going to be adding tons of different things into this document and bringing this canvas to life. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to introduce you to layers. So if we go to our little sidebar right here, we can click sidebar to bring this in and out. I like having it off to the side because I like seeing how all of my layers are organized. But you can see that we have layer 1 right here. So let me talk to you a little bit about what layers are and the reason why it's important to use the layers feature. Layers are important because as we add more images and text to our project, our file can get really big and complicated if everything is on top of each other. So it's important to become familiar with the layers tool in any program, but especially in a program like Linearity Curve, so you can separate all of your images and text, which are also known as like design assets or design materials, because it becomes so much easier to work with them individually instead of having to spend 10 minutes trying to select the right shape and work with that particular shape. Okay, so we already have a layer right here, and I'm just going to stick with that, and I'll continue to add more layers as we go along. For this first layer, I'm going to double click, and I'm going to go ahead and rename this layer Inspo. Okay, so again, for this particular project, I'm kind of walking you through my workflow on how I would go about designing a logo or going through a branding challenge. So the first part of a design process that's really important to do is to do your research. So for this particular branding challenge, I want you to pick a logo for one of your favorite brands, and I want you to, and what you're going to do is you're going to do a really quick cut and dry redesign of that logo. And obviously, I'm not expecting the product to look super fancy. This is just to kind of get to know the program Linearity Curve a little bit better. So, with that being said, this first layer, the inspo layer, is where I collect all of my reference images that I take from my research that I want to have on hand ready to look at and view as I'm going about completing my project. Okay, so I'm going to click escape here. I'm going to double click here. I'm going to go to my home screen. I'm going to go into one of my previous projects here. I'm going to select all of my reference images, and then I'm going to go back to my home screen, and I'm going to go back to the untitled project that I'm working on, and I'm going to Command V, which is the shortcut on a Mac. On a PC, it would be Control V to paste into there. In order for me to copy, I clicked Command C, which would be Control C on a PC or a non-Apple computer, to bring these images into my project. So, as you can see here, I've decided to redesign the BMW logo. And again, it's not going to be a super crisp, clean, I'll present it to the executive board of BMW the next day type of logo. This is going to be something that, I'm just going to create using basic tools in Linearity Curve. Just to get to know the program a little bit better. Okay, so these are all of my reference images. Go ahead and pause this video and put in your reference images that you're going to use when creating or redesigning the logo for your favorite brand. So some things I'd recommend you include would be the logo itself, the logo that you're planning on redesigning. For me, I was specifically looking at design cues that are common throughout the different BMW cars, which is why I have pictures of different BMW cars. And BMW has an M series, which is their competition car series, and so they modernized that logo fairly recently, so I wanted to incorporate that in my reference images as well. Okay, so go ahead and come back to this video once you've done that. Okay, and now at this point, I'm assuming that you have your reference images pulled into Linearity Curve and you're all ready to go. So we're going to go over to the sidebar over here, and I want to introduce you to what this lock icon and what this little eye icon each do. So if I click the lock button, what it's going to do is it's going to lock my layer, okay? That means that if I'm working on another layer, I'm not accidentally touching any of this. So I'm trying to click around and none of these photos are selecting, right? That's because I locked my layer. If I click unlock, I can move this image around, I can move this image around, I can do all of that. Now, in order to undo that action, I'm going to use a shortcut on my computer, on my keyboard, called Command Z. Sorry, I just undid both of those. On a PC or a non-Apple computer, it would be Control Z that you would use to click undo, okay? Now, for this eye icon over here, this tells me whether or not my layer is visible. So I'm going to go ahead and click lock. I always click lock by default, especially in my reference layer, because I don't want to be accidentally moving these images around. If I click on this, it's going to put a strike through. That means that this layer is going to be rendered invisible, not going to be able to see anything. So it's like pretending that I'm back to my blank canvas, even though I'm not actually back to that blank canvas. And if I click it on, it's visible, I can see it. Okay, does that make sense? Awesome. So the next tool I'm going to introduce you to is the shape tool. So now that we have our reference images, I want you to click insert right here. We're going to click insert new layer. All right. And what Linearity Curve is going to do is it's going to give us a brand new blank canvas layer we can work on. Now you're like, Rachel, this does not look like it's a blank canvas. Well, if I click this little eye icon, my inspo layer is now invisible, and so it's almost like I'm working on a blank canvas again. So that's what the pro about the little icon eye icon does. So before I forget, I'm going to double click to rename this layer, because what I don't want to happen is I don't want to have layers 1 through 20 in my file if my file gets really big, and I am trying to click through each layer trying to figure out which shape belongs on which layer. Okay, so I'm just going to rename it. It's going to be super easy. We're going to call this one, that's not how you spell shapes. We're going to spell it shapes. Awesome. So I'm going to make this visible again, but I'm going to keep it locked so that these images don't accidentally move. Okay, so we have this little bar of tools over here. And now there's a lot of tools, okay? We're not going to go over every tool in this tutorial. We're only going to go over a few. And again, the one that we're going to go over right now is the shape tool, which looks like this little rectangle right here, okay? If I click on this, it's going to give me several different options, okay? I'm going to have a rectangle, a circle, a star, a hexagon, it looks like, a line, and then like a curvy line tool, so I can just draw spirals freehand. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this oval tool, and I'm going to draw the base of my logo here, all right? And I'm going to kind of trace it over this. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on a spot, and you're going to drag, okay? Now, as I'm dragging, you can see that the circle is morphing into an ellipse and an oval and all these crazy things. Well, what if I want it to be a perfect circle? Great question. What you're going to do is, while you're still holding down your circle here, so I haven't clicked away from it yet, because if I click, it's just going to make the shape, and I'm not going to be able to change it, okay? So I click delete, I'm re-clicking the circle tool, and I'm dragging it. I'm going to hold down shift so that the circle remains perfect, which is exactly what I want. Awesome, and I'm gonna let go, and now I have my shape. I'm gonna click my mouse tool to get back to my mouse tool so I can move this around. Awesome, and now I have my circle. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the color of this circle, because as much as I love this color blue, it doesn't really match the aesthetic of the redesigned BMW logo that I'm going for. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here to this panel. And here we can change our fill, we can change our stroke, and we can do our paths. We're not going to touch appearance, effects, or paths today. That's a tutorial for another day. We're just going to work with fill and stroke. So fill is the color of the inside of the circle, and the stroke is the outline of the circle. So this blue is the fill of my circle, and so I want to change the fill of my circle to this black color right here. And I can do that one of two ways, and I'm going to show you both, and you can pick whichever one you prefer, okay? So I'm going to click on my blue here, and it's going to bring up this little color panel right here. I see white is up here in this corner, and black is down here in this corner, and that stays consistent across whichever color I end up choosing. Okay, and because I just want black, what I can do is I can just drag this little circle all the way down to black, and my color is black. Okay, so that's one way I can change the fill. Okay, the second way, I'm going to click Command Z on this. Okay, the second way is to use this little eyedropper tool. And so what this does is if I click on the eyedropper tool, I can go over one of my reference images. So I'm going to go over my BMW logo reference, and I'm going to click the black that I want, and it's going to give me that black, okay? So, two different ways to accomplish the same thing. Pick whichever way you prefer, and you can go with that way. Whichever way works, totally fine, okay? So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. I have my circle tool. Okay, I'm gonna make this just a teensy bit smaller, holding down shift so that my circle remains the same size. Awesome. Okay, so that was an introduction to the shapes tool, okay? The next tool I'm gonna introduce you to is not necessarily a tool, but it is a feature of Linearity Curve, and that is the library feature. So if you didn't want to go to Google and do all of this research for images, you can actually research images right here in Linearity Curve, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and lock the shapes layer. I'm going to insert a new layer. All right, and I'm going to rename this Honeycomb. Now, the reason why I'm renaming it Honeycomb was because when I was looking at this headlight design that BMW has going on in a lot of their cars, I like how it feels sharper than the kind of, you know, quarter circle thing, pie shape they have going on in their current logo. I like how it feels sharp, modern, clean, but still has those curves. And it kind of reminded me of a honeycomb. So I was like, you know what? I am just going to do some honeycomb shapes to replace these quarter pie looking shapes in this logo. So I need to find a reference image of honeycombs. And I could go to Google and I could do that, or I can click this little library button and I'm going to go down to this little icon called Unsplash. And unsplash.com is this amazing website where photographers upload images that you can use for free. So you don't have to cite their name, and you don't have to worry about copyright at all. And so that makes it really easy when you're doing design projects that involve big company names like this branding design challenge that we're doing. So I can search the website right here in Linearity Curve, and I'm going to search honeycomb. And I'm going to scroll through my options. Okay, I'm kind of liking this option, so I'm going to click and drag right into it, and I'm all set. I've already got my image set in there. I'm going to X out of this, X out of this. Perfect. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and resize this. I'm going to hold down Shift and resize this image, because if I don't hold down Shift, it's going to warp it, and I don't want that. So we're going to hold down Shift. Cool. That's a decent resize right there. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to lock this layer so that doesn't move, and I'm going to insert a new layer, and I'm going to call this HC shape. Just HC stands for honeycomb. There's no rhyme or reason to the way that you have to name your layers. I just kind of go with what I'm feeling, and I go with that. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to trace over a honeycomb in this photo so that I can make my honeycomb shape. Now, what tool would I use to do that? I would actually use a tool called the pen tool. And the pen tool looks like this. It's this third one right from the top. And this is, imagine like a pen where you're connecting the dots to create a shape. That's kind of what you're doing with this tool. So there's a couple of different things that you want to know about the pen tool. The first one is that when you're tracing something or tracing the outline of a shape, using stroke instead of a fill is so much easier because you can see your path a lot more clearly in the pen tool. And let me show you why. So if I'm tracing a honeycomb shape right here and my fill is black, which I actually might change because black is hard to see. I like to pick a color that's easy to see, but then I'll change it later. So if I pick a fill that's red and I'm tracing my path right here, so as you can see, it's creating these points that are going to be along a path. And so my goal is to connect all the dots around and get back to that first one that I made. You see that it's filling the outline, but these little blue lines are really hard to see on my computer unless I really zoom in. Okay, so I want those blue lines to be really easy to see, and I don't particularly care about the fill of the shape and having that immediately be visible to me, because I can change the fill of the shape or add fill to the shape later on. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm going to Command Z on all of this, which means undo. Again, Command Z is the keyboard shortcut for undo on Mac. On PC, it would be Control Z. I'm going to click my pen tool again. I'm going to turn off my fill, which means my shape won't have any fill, and I'm going to turn on stroke. Okay, so it has this blue color right here. I'm going to leave it at that, but I am going to decrease the width. So I can do my down arrows right here, and the width essentially means how thick my stroke is. And I don't want it to be super thick because I am drawing a fairly small shape, so I'll just make the width of 1. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and start tracing on my honeycomb shape. So I'm gonna make it pretty approximate. It doesn't have to be perfect. I want to keep my edges nice and sharp, and as you can see, it's starting to outline my path, so it's really easy for me to see what I've already traced. And then I'm going to connect it right back to that, and I have my honeycomb shape. Awesome. So what am I going to do with this now that I've traced it out? I'm going to immediately click back to my mouse tool so that I'm not accidentally creating a bigger path or a weird shape that I don't want. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the stroke and turn on the fill so that my shape is now filled to a lovely little red color. Now, do I love the red? No. Will I change it later? Absolutely. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and make this bigger. Again, hold down Shift so that the size isn't super manipulated. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to bring this over here. So I kind of want to make a cool like crisscrossy design using 4 honeycombs. So I'm going to decrease the size of this a little bit. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and take my eyedropper. I'm going to find the color right here, just like I did for the black. I'm going to click that. All right, I'm rather liking that color. That's not too bad. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate this shape. So I'm going to click Command C on my keyboard again for copy, Command V for paste, and drag it down. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and pick, kind of want like a darker, oop, why are we not moving? There we go. Yeah, I like that darker color. Maybe make it a little bit more blue. Yes, nice. Okay, cool. Command C, Command V. I'm gonna make this one, maybe you'll make it lighter. Cool. Again, I'm just going quick and easy through this. It doesn't have to be perfect. All right, let me go to my fill again. What color do I want this to be? Why not? We'll do that color. Okay. Now, I'm not loving, maybe I'll Command C. Actually, Command X will be cut and Command V will be paste. Let's see how that looks. Okay, not bad. Not bad. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do is I am feeling okay about the way that these shapes are made. And I know that I can edit them later, so I'll go back to them later. I kind of am liking the geometric design that's going on right here. So now if I have the shapes the way that I want to select all 4 shapes at the same time and group them so that I don't accidentally move one of them and make it off on accident. So I'm going to select one of the shapes. I'm going to hold down Shift. I'm going to select the other 3 shapes. Okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm going to scroll down until I click Group. What's going to do is it's going to make these all one shape. All right? So I don't have to individually worry about all 4. They're just one shape now. Okay? So that's grouping. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to bring that there. Perfect. So I'm starting to have the makings of a logo. Not too bad. Okay, we're going to bring this down a little bit. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add some text, right? Because how do you know if it's a BMW logo if there's no BMW text on there, right? So that's the last tool that I'm going to be introducing you to in this tutorial. And then after that, you're going to have most of the essentials down that you need to make a really good logo redesign for this challenge, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this little shape layer. I'm going to insert a new layer and start working with my text tools. And I'm just going to call this text. Nice and simple. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my little toolbar right here, and this T is my text tool. So over here, it comes up with a fun little panel. This is my fonts panel. Now, Helvetica is the default font. To give you context, Helvetica is the default font that Apple uses for a lot of their advertising campaigns and on their computers. Helvetica is not a bad font. I know you all are not here for a Font 101 as much as I would love to give a Font 101 tutorial right now. But I would honestly recommend straying away from a default font and picking a font that's a little bit more unique. Now, for this project, I will probably end up going with Avenir Next, simply because that's a font that I'm familiar with. I've used Avenir Next in a lot of projects, and I've used it for many years. So that's a font that I'm pretty comfortable with using and manipulating. If you want to go crazy, you can go to the website defont.com and find a really funky font that a typographer has made, and you can use that for your logo redesign project, but that's completely up to you. In this panel, you can decide how bold you want your font, so I will demonstrate that in just a minute, and then this is the size of your font. So you can use the up and down arrows to increase or decrease the size. You can also type in the size that you want if you want a custom size, okay? Appearance, we have opacity, which is how transparent your text is. For this project, I would like you to keep it at 100%. Let's not fiddle with opacity today, maybe for another project. And then we have our fill and stroke. As always, it works the same way for text as it does for shapes, okay? For fill, I'm actually going to change this to a whiter color because I want to keep the color of the font the same. Okay, so in order to start typing, I'm going to click and I'm going to type the letter B. Cool. Now, this is a very light font, so I'm going to make this, how bold do I want it? That's a little too bold. We'll do demi-bold. Cool. All right, I'm going to make this fill white. Awesome. Let me X out of this real quick. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead and rotate this guy. I'm going to actually scooch it over here so I can get the rotation just right. This is why locked layers are really handy. Cool. I'm going to drag it over here. Now that's kind of big, so I'm going to make this maybe a size 21 instead. Yes, that's much better. Awesome. So I have my B in place. Perfect. Now I can Command C and Command V this text, copy and paste. If I want the size and boldness and everything to be the same, if I want to change the boldness, I can go back to my text tool, click, type in my letter, and keep going. For this one, I'm just going to copy and paste simply because the only thing I'm going to be changing is the letter and also the rotation. You can see that the degrees of the rotation comes up here, so you can see it increases to like 14, 15. I'm going to wait till it says 0 so I know it's perfectly straight. Awesome, and I'm going to center that right there. Cool, and I'm using my align tools for that come up. Cool. All right, and then I'm going to copy and paste this again. Type in my W. I'm going to drag my W over here so that I can get the rotation just right. Awesome. Drag it back over. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to unlock my honeycomb shape layer because I want these to be a little bit smaller. All right, how are we looking? Not looking too shabby. All right, now the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock these layers, and I'm just going to add a quick little outline with my circle tool to my honeycombs. So I'm going to change my fill, I'm going to add my stroke. I'm going to make this white. And you see how that's the outline of the circle, which looks very different from the fill. Let's see. I want to see what it looks like if I have it around my honeycombs. And again, I'm just kind of playing around with the program. Feel free to do the same thing. The best way to learn any program, especially if you're fairly new to digital art, is really just experimenting with it. You can make some really, really cool pieces just playing around with the program. Okay, now what if I dragged this layer so it was underneath my honeycomb shape? So you can see now how the honeycomb shape is over the white outline versus if I drag this up, the white shape is over. So that's how I can drag my layers up and down. I can change the order. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay, not loving how big that is, so we'll decrease that back. Okay, let me unlock my text layer. I'm going to select all 3 of these, make it 18. There we go, that's better. That looks a lot nicer. All right, I'm going to copy and paste this and just make the size bigger so that I can have a little outline on the edge. Awesome. So we've got the makings of a logo. Obviously, this is nowhere near done. I would probably spend a good 2 more hours making different versions of this. Hold on, let me retitle this layer really quick. Circle outlines. Cool. I would probably make like 20 different iterations of this and keep working on it. But you're not here to watch me fiddle with this for 2 hours. You're just here to watch my kind of how I go about doing a workflow for a brand design challenge. I hope you learned something new about Linearity Curve today. Again, we went over the pen tool, we went over the shape tool, we went over the type tool, and we went over a couple of different features in Linearity Curve. But obviously, like the entirety of like these Boolean features, these masking features, auto trace, we didn't really go over any of that. And that's definitely a tutorial for another day. But Linearity Curve has so many cool features. These are just a few. Again, experimenting with this program is going to be the best way to learn. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Don't forget, this Linearity Curve does autosave your files, but it would probably be a good idea to rename that file to something other than untitled. I just click the down arrow and it'll come up with a little panel on the bottom left. I can call this Branding Design Challenge, and I can click enter and it renames my file for me. Okay? So that is all I had for you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new and have a great rest of your day. Bye.